Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to another episode of 5 Influential Horror. Today, I'm joined with the second half of Sledgehammer Horror, Ken. We had Ashley back in August talking her 5 Influential, and so it's Ken's turn to talk about his Influential. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on. It really means a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for making time to come on. Ashley and I had a great conversation with her Influential, and I learned so much about her. It was really great. So excited to talk about it.
I loved it. It was awesome watching you guys. I get to watch my best friend with another one of my great friends talk about horror. It was a great time.
Yeah. I will say, I don't think a single one on your list has been on this series yet. So that's pretty exciting. Maybe one, but I'm pretty sure a majority of these have not been on the list before. So do you want to talk a second about what you do over at Sledgehammer Horror real quick, and then we'll jump in?
Yeah. So Sledgehammer Horror, we don't like to pin ourselves down to one thing. We have a segment called My First Horror Movie, where that's the one that I do by myself, where we bring guests on to talk about the first horror movie they watched, what it meant to them, how it affects them. Then Ashley writes a segment called Didn't See That Coming, where we talk about movies with a twist ending and what we like about them, what we dislike about them. Mm-hmm. Ashley writes another one called Versus that we do together, where we watch an original, we watch a remake, and then we talk about each one, what we like and dislike about each one, and which one is our overall favorite. And we just started bringing a new segment on called In Defense Of, where we bring on guests to defend movies that they love that aren't really loved overall in the genre.
Yeah.
And once a week, we'll do a live episode. Whether it's, a top 10 ranking, a franchise ranking, something like that.
Yeah.
Ashley's been pumping out movie reviews, and we're going to start doing a lot more Sledgehammer Presents, like in-person stuff, going to like real haunted places here in Michigan.
So excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm stoked. We got our first episode written. And then, like, we just went to, we've done one where we went to, a haunted house here in Michigan. We got a big offer to go and do that. And then we got another one to go. Oh, yeah, they are. Look, they're stickers. See?
Aww.
Sorry, I got to be dad for a second.
That's okay.
Oh, no, they're tattoos, baby. Go have Sissy put the tattoo on your arm.
Okay.
All right, love you. So, and then we've got paid to go do this haunted house attraction here in our town. And then we went out to Centralia, which is the influence for the Silent Hill movie. And we did like an on-location thing there. So like we had a lot of fun doing that. And here in the new year, we're going to really, pull back a little bit on My First Horror Movies. Because right now I'm recording 5 to 7 a week and releasing them every other day.
Yeah. You're up to like 500 or something. Like you have like a crazy number of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't love doing it, because I do, but we just want to kind of start, putting our focus on other things, like more movie reviews, more in-person stuff, still do My First Horror Movies, but, really scale them back in the new year and try to branch off into more new things with Sledgehammer Horror. So 2024, we're going to try to, just like everything else, you want to build and expand and mature, and, we're trying to do that, and it's hard to do that when, like I said, 5 to 7 days out of the week, I'm recording episodes. So we're going to really try to shift our focus to more reviews, in-person stuff, and maybe a couple new segments Ash and I have been kicking around. So very excited to see where that goes in the new year.
Yeah. And I'll have all of Sledgehammer Horror links in the description for the episode, so you can go follow them and keep up with what they're doing over there. Yeah. So we'll jump into your first one. Your first one is 1985 House.
Yes. Easily the most influential horror movie in my life.
Yeah.
It was my first horror movie. It's a comfort horror movie for me. I still watch it probably 10 to 12 times a year. My own acting, I really base off of Roger Cobb, William Catt, his performance in this film.
Yeah.
I really try to bring that when I'm in front of the camera doing stuff. That's
I can see that.
like just like the sarcastic but doe eyes type thing. Like that's really what
Yeah.
I try to focus on.
Yeah.
And it's just like this movie to me is everything. It's
Yeah.
a horror story. It's a love story. It's a
Mm.
missing child story. It's a Vietnam War story. There's a lot of comedy to
A
go
lot of
along with it.
fun. Yep.
So this is just like really like one of the most perfect movies for me because it really is an encapsulation of everything that piques my interest.
Yeah.
Um, and it's definitely it's a mystery. You
Yeah.
know, what happened to the boy? Where is the boy? Who took the
Yeah.
boy? Like there's all these different questions that get asked throughout the movie and great jump scares. It's just like I said, it's such a perfect movie. I can't recommend this movie enough. And it's free on YouTube, so you don't even got to pay to watch
I
it now, which I
mean,
think is super
yeah.
dope. And I watch this movie so many times throughout my life. And
Mm.
Ashley and I, we live in Michigan, and
Yeah.
we went to California for a vacation, and we went to the house.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, I literally cried standing out in front of it. Like I
Aw.
FaceTimed my grandma and I was showing her like where we were because me and her used to watch this movie all the time,
Aw.
and we used to play house. Like we would go to the closet and be like, we got to open it at exactly 12 o'clock. And then she would act like the grandfather clock was going off, and we'd
Oh,
open the door and act like monsters were coming out at us.
that's
And
so fun.
yeah, so like I said, this movie, like I genuinely believe if I hadn't watched House for my very first horror movie, that I probably would not be here today. I wouldn't be the same person I am today without House. It's just that's how important this movie is to me. I like House more than like 80% of the people I've met in my life. So like that's what this movie means to me. It's just a very special movie to me, and it still holds up today. I love this movie still today. The score is fantastic.
Yeah, music's great.
Fantastic score. Um
Yeah.
and Harry Manfredini did the score.
Mhm.
And Sean Cunningham had a lot to do with this, so it's still, you know, you can feel a Friday the 13th vibe
Mhm.
throughout, which I think is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely the most, when people want to talk about my most influential horror movie, it's going to be House 1986. It's just that special to me.
Yeah. And how old were you when you watched this for the first time?
3 or 4, very
Yeah.
young.
Same age I was when I watched Poltergeist, yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah,
Old
very
enough
young.
to remember and for it to make a difference.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that one hasn't been on here before. Which I guess is actually surprised because I've had a lot of people come on with 80s horror seems to be influential for a lot of us that are in our 30s and 40s, like because that's what we grew up with and that's what we saw mostly. So I'm really surprised that this one hasn't been on anybody's list, but it was exciting to talk about it because I haven't been able to yet.
Well, I just feel like, you know, the first movies you watched when you were a kid are the ones that impacted you the most because it introduced you to it. So I feel like those are going to be, because even to this day, I still lean more towards horror comedy and supernatural horror. Like, and I feel like that
Yeah.
is House. You know, that's a
Yeah.
horror comedy. There's a lot of supernatural that goes along with it. So I just feel like it's so influential that that's still what I look for in horror movies. So
Yeah.
this had to be number one. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is my most influential horror movie.
Yeah, and it's a good point because when I think about the things that I loved about Poltergeist while I was growing up watching it over and over and over again, it's things that I still look for too. I really prefer stories that are more about families. I really like stories that are supernatural, that talk about other dimensions, that go into these otherworldly things. And it has definitely shaped the things that I still look forward to. So I definitely understand that. Yeah. And then of course, when you grow up with these things and they become so important to you, you start to notice easily the things that it's influenced. So like you can watch other movies and you'll say, oh, it's clearly influenced by House or these other films because you are so connected to it. You can just see it in other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, your number 2 is Child's Play 3.
Yep.
This is a fun one.
It's my favorite movie from my favorite franchise.
Okay.
Child's Play, when it comes to a franchise, Child's Play is my favorite, and then you got 2A and 2B, which would be Evil Dead and Saw.
Yeah.
But it's just like, again, I go back to that time. Yeah, I remember watching this movie when it first came out on TV. So it had to be like, 92, 93, when it was actually like on HBO
Mm-hmm.
or Showtime or whatever it was. And I had seen 1 and 2, And then I remember watching this for the first time when it had come out on cable,
Mhm.
showing my age here. And back then, it wasn't like the movie played in theaters and then 2 weeks later it was streaming. Like, it
No.
wasn't like that. Like, it was
No.
a good 6 months to a year before
Yeah.
it would hit, your cable networks. And
Yep.
I just remember being enthralled from the start. And this is a movie that I could probably quote from beginning to end. And
Mhm.
I feel like this is the perfect Chucky to me. He's very comedic, but he's still very scary. And two of the darkest deaths in the whole franchise take place in Child's Play 3, in my opinion, with the garbage truck guy and
Yep.
with his best friend, why can't Whitehurst, with
Whitehurst.
Whitehurst and the guy in the garbage truck. I think those are two of the darkest deaths in this whole franchise.
Yeah.
And then him switching out the bullets, like that's super
Oh my,
dark. 'Cause he's,
to make them real
Christoph-
instead of the, oh yeah.
yeah, and so you got these kids that are killing these other kids, thinking that it's paintballs. Then you got the obvious, like my favorite one-liners, like the one where he's first getting on the computer. He's like, "I gotta get out of this goddamn body. Where are you, you little shit?" Like, I love that line. And
Yeah.
presto, you're dead is a huge one.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a good, yeah.
yeah, and again, it's not perfect by any stretch. Like, it's not a perfect film, but
Yeah.
it's one of those comfort movies for me too, where we've done a watch along on Sledgehammer Horror for two different movies. The first one was Trick or Treat because it was voted on by subscribers, and the second one was Child's Play 3. And our next one, which will be later this month, is The People Under the Stairs, which is Ashley's
Oh,
favorite horror movie.
that's a good one.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. We talked about that on her list. Yep. Yep.
yep. Then that's her favorite, and
That's a great
so I
one.
was like, yeah, of course, I would love to watch that with you, and our family watch it. I don't know if the girls are going to make it through this one like they did Trick or Treat and Child's Play 3, but
Yeah.
um, Child's Play 3 is another one. Like I said, horror comedy is always something that I've gravitated towards,
Yeah.
and this one has like the perfect mixture of the two. And even the characters in this film, like Shelton, that you hate, are so well done. And me and my friend Cody, we were talking about it, and one of the negatives about this film is Shelton didn't get like a redemption arc. Like,
No,
yeah,
yeah.
Colonel Shelton, he's a dick. He's, but that's what sergeants are,
Mhm.
and that's what he's supposed to be. But like he
Mhm.
takes the good guy down to give to his little sister. He has a heart. He loves his
It's in
family.
there. Yeah.
Right. I would have loved to have seen him get some type of redemption arc,
Mhm.
but it is nice to see him realize that Barkley was telling the truth when he gets there, and he's just like, "Holy shit!" when he sees Chucky for the first time.
Mhm. Yep.
And I still, being a huge Chucky fan, I would love to see Tyler or De Silva show up in the Chucky TV series.
Oh,
I think that would be
yeah.
so
I've
dope.
said the same thing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
said the same thing.
I think that would just be that would be like the cherry on top for me, because, like I said, that's one of my favorite movies in this franchise. It
Yeah.
is hands down my favorite in the franchise.
Yeah.
Again, is it a perfect film? No. Like, I could point out
Yeah.
a bunch of errors throughout the film, but um, it just doesn't. They're not big enough to warrant me not adoring this film and having such a huge impact on me. And again, I can't tell you how many times in my life I've said, "Presto, you're dead," or "Where are you, you little shit?" Like, the way he says it, and you see his reflection in the computer as he's
So
saying it.
serious too.
Oh my god, I love it so much. Or like when he's jumps out to scare the main, like the big corporal guy, and he starts to have a heart attack, and he's just like, "You gotta be fucking kidding me!" Like,
Disappointed. Yeah.
he feels robbed out of that kill.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's brilliant. I think it was logical to take this step, because
Mhm.
you just had two movies in a row of young Andy Barkley getting tortured by this, good
Yes.
guy Dow.
Yep.
And this movie came out, like, to show like the dedication they had. This movie came out literally like 9 months after Child's Play 2. So that was jarring to people. Like, 9 months ago, we saw Andy Barkley as a 7-year-old. Now he's an 18-year-old.
Not as
So I
an
get
adult.
why people weren't a huge fan of this movie. And then you had the controversy over in Europe. I don't know if you know about that, but a little boy had killed another little boy, and they
I
said that he
didn't
was
know.
influenced by Child's Play 3, so they pulled it throughout Europe.
Oh,
Like,
I
it
didn't
was
know
pulled.
that. Oh.
Yeah. So, like, it had a huge controversy overseas. And obviously here a lot of people were like, "What's this time jump all about?"
Yeah,
But I feel like
sure.
when you go back and rewatch it now, it's just one of those films that just totally stands up. And it's
Mhm.
funny, it's scary, there's sad moments. The acting is, spotty at parts, but it's kids, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, Child's Play 3, my favorite movie of my favorite franchise. House will always be
Yeah.
tops. But when it comes to the Child's Play franchise, which as a franchise is my overall favorite, Child's Play 3 easily number one for me in that franchise.
Yeah. So Child's Play 3 was actually the first Chucky movie I ever saw. I saw it. It was on TV. It was on, I don't know whatever it was on, heavily edited. So it must have been like maybe the Sci-Fi Channel or something like that. But it was the first time I had ever met Chucky. I think I'd heard about the movies. And I watched them like super out of order because I watched that and then I watched Bride of Chucky and then I eventually went back and watched,
Okay.
1 and 2. But I saw 1 and 2 much later. This was my introduction to the story of Chucky and Charles Lee Ray and everything else. And it's such a fun one. And I actually I'm very very late to the game on the TV show. I started watching the first season like 2 months ago. I drug my feet on it. It took me forever to finish the first season. But then like I was so into it by the end of it. I like watched all of season 2 in like 2 days. And then just in time for season 3, which is a perfect. So yeah, it's a really, really fun franchise. I'm glad that it's still going.
Me too. I've always had a lot of fun with this franchise. Even the bad films. Like I don't think there's really a bad film in the franchise. Seed of Chucky and Cult of Chucky are probably near the bottom for
The
me.
weakest, yeah.
Yeah, but they're still good. Like
It's
Seed
still
of
fun.
Chucky has some graphic kills.
It does.
So I mean, like and Cult of Chucky is hilarious. Like the
That
three
one's fun.
Chuckies. The 5-minute bickering between the three Chuckies is worth the price of admission for me. Like that
Yeah.
whole thing. I've never felt so alive. Well, you've been alive for 13 seconds.
Seconds.
Like that whole thing. Like I thought that was great. And I really love Fiona Dourif. I think she was fantastic in the movie. So
Yeah.
that was another saving grace for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a franchise that is just super, super important to me. Like so
Yeah.
special and so important to me.
Yeah. Oh. Well, yeah, when you're talking about liking like kind of leaning more towards into like horror comedies, it's super obvious with this list because it's like all horror comedies. I do.
I think the one that's not really a comedy is the last
Oh
one. I
well,
think
yeah,
the
that's
last
true.
one is pretty
Not
dark.
really, no. That's
But
more, yeah, serious. But the
yeah,
first
besides
4,
that, they're all pretty horror
they're all
comedy.
horror movies. Yeah. So the next one is Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. This is a clinic on how to do.
I don't know where's my phone, but I got a tattoo.
Your tattoo looks beautiful. All right, go downstairs to Sissy. Her phone's in the kitchen. So with Evil Dead 2, I think that it's just like a clinic on how to be a one-man show. Bruce Campbell and everything he does in this movie, like he's his own stunt man and like he does all these crazy stunts throughout the movie. And he really makes you feel like he's there with a deer head in his hand. And until obviously, the middle of the second act and you get the rest of the people coming in.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is where Bruce Campbell becomes Ash Williams.
Right.
Like in the first film, he's kind of like a little bitch. And like, I mean that with the most respect, Bruce. But in the second film, he's a badass. Like he cuts off his hand. And I think it's so funny, like little details in this movie, like when he cuts his hand off and he puts it underneath the pot and he puts the books on top. The top book is A Farewell to Arms. And I think that's so funny. Like just that subtle little thing is just so perfect to me. And obviously like him dancing with the lamp, like, I think that's so good. And I think this is the perfect way. You can always have the debate. Is Evil Dead 2 a sequel or is it a reimagining of the first one?
Right.
Because this really does retcon everything that happened in the first film.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Scotty and the girls didn't go with him. It was just him and Linda. So, I mean, like, you could really make the argument that this is a reimagining of the first film.
Yeah.
But just like a continuation, like Sam Raimi was just like, hey, we got a bigger budget. Let's fix the stuff I don't like from part 1 and still make this one extend off it. And like the moment where Linda's dancing outside and her head goes to, Like that moment is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Bobby Joe. So funny. And the first piece of fan fiction I ever wrote was an Evil Dead fan film that extended
Cool.
off of part 2 because we find Henrietta, in the fruit cellar, but we never ever know what happened to him.
Yeah, you're right.
Like we get a little like glimpse of his head, you know what I mean? But we never ever know what happened to Professor Noby. Like we never see where he went, what happened to him.
That's true.
So the first piece of fan fiction that Ash and I ever worked on together took place 40 years after the events of Evil Dead 2 and what happens in that time frame. So that's one of the ones that was again a movie that really, really capitalized to me on not just the horror comedy aspect, but how one person can completely steal a show in a movie and make you feel like there's so many different things around him when really there isn't. And the cinematography of it, like when he's looking in the mirror and he's like, I'm fine. And then his reflection comes out of the mirror at him and he's like, we just chopped up our girlfriend. Does that sound fine to you? Like that was good. That was good. And all done practically. But what I love is when you have the moment of him at the mirror and he touches it and turns into water. The way they did that was they had Bruce looking into a tiny little puddle of water and they had the lights shining on it so bright that you couldn't see anything else. So it looked like a mirror and he would touch it. And that's when the ripple effect happened and they cut back to the real mirror.
Yeah.
But again, like on the budget they had to keep it practical and do it like that is just brilliant. And I love it. I love watching the behind the scenes of the Blu-ray on that and seeing like how they did certain things. And it's one of those movies that, like I said, it sticks with you. Universally, I would say close to probably 90% of the people I talk to, it's their favorite in that franchise.
Yeah. I would say the same for people I talk to about the franchise as well.
Right. And I agree. It's my favorite in the franchise, followed very closely by Evil Dead 2013. But Evil Dead 2 still edges it out by just a tiny bit. So, yeah, Evil Dead 2. And it's comedy done the right way. Like, it's slapsticky, but it's not spoof. Like, it's not, like, over the top with it. But it's still really well done. Such a well done film. And I adore it.
Yeah. I feel like Evil Dead fans, like whenever I have conversations about the films, I usually get that too. And there's always these conversations about, like you're talking about, like the way that it's filmed. And like, it's so interesting because there's plenty of people that are in fandoms that when they talk about films, they talk about what's in the film, what they love about it, what was scary, what was whatever. But I feel like a lot of Evil Dead fans talk about the way that these movies are shot, the way, like the effects, how they still work so well now, obviously because they're practical, but the cinematography, I mean, that opening shot, even in one, that are the long shots in the woods and just all of these frames and how they set up this story is like such smart filmmaking. And it's something that always comes up in conversations about Evil Dead with people that genuinely love the franchise, that have seen them and over and over again, because it's things that still work. Those techniques are still effective. They still work. It's coming. It still gets you. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the same as if you watched it, you're watching it for the first time. And I think that's huge testament to the filmmaking for those movies in general.
Oh, man. And especially for how young they all were.
Oh, my God. Yeah. So true.
Like the first Evil Dead was like a college film. It was like a college project.
Yeah.
And then it became one of the best horror movies of all time to a lot of people. So much credit to them for the writing and the hard work they all put in to do it. It's what happens when you're born and raised in Michigan, baby. You got that work ethic.
Okay, so your number 4 is Shaun of the Dead.
My number 1 comfort horror film. The only thing wrong with this movie to me is the title. I hate the title of this film.
Do you have a proposed, like, what would you call it?
I would have just called it like Shaun.
Just his name?
Yeah, just Shaun, or Panic on the Streets of London, you know, to honor the song by the Smiths that's planned.
Yeah.
Anything, because when you hear the name Shaun of the Dead, you think this is going to be like a spoof type scary movie, airplane type film.
Yep.
And it's not. Like, there is nothing spoof about this movie. Like, it's an
So
original story, original characters, real emotional development. Like, there's so much about this movie. Yeah, it's goofy, but I feel like a lot of it is realistic goofy. Like,
I agree. Yes.
Yeah, like when the zombies are there and they're like trying to throw records at them and they can't hit them. You know, like I love that. Like, I feel like that's so realistic. Like, you get all these movies where like the zombies come and then everybody turns into Arnold Schwarzenegger from Predator. You know, in this movie, like, they can't hit them to save their lives. I think that's great. And like the relationship with Shaun and Liz, I feel like is very real, very genuine. I had Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz on a DVD that was they were like together on the same DVD. And Ashley and I would put it on every night before I went to bed, and I would just hit repeat, and I would wake up in the middle of the night to either Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz going, and I would just lay there for a little bit and just watch it and just be enamored with Edgar Wright's storytelling, even through just like his cinematography. Hot Fuzz is another one. I mean, like, it's definitely got horror. It's horror adjacent.
Yeah.
But it's more of like an action drama to me.
A little bit of a mystery. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's another fantastic, fantastic film.
I like all three of them. I just saw At the World's End, like, for the first time over the summer. I had never seen that one, and I really liked that one too. I guess that'd be like more sci-fi, but I really liked that one too. They're solid movies.
Yeah. And it's funny because like The World's End, I think, is great. It's my least favorite of the trilogy.
Yeah.
But if you make 3 movies, and of those 3 movies, the worst thing that comes out of your 3 movies is The World's End, that would be the best movie in a lot of other trilogies.
Yeah.
So when I say The World's End is my least favorite, that's not a slam at The World's End.
Yeah.
It's a praise to Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz for being like The World's End is my son's favorite. Me and him, we watched the whole Coronado trilogy probably 6 months to a year ago, and he said the same thing. He was like, The World's End is my favorite. Like, me and him, I laughed my ass off throughout that movie.
It is very funny. Yeah.
It reminds me of the friends I grew up with. Like, it really does.
Yeah.
But with Shaun, like I said, it's just I sob every time his mom dies.
When
they're in the bar. Like, that scene, I don't care how many times I've watched this movie, that will punch me in the gut every single time I watch that scene. And like I said, like, it pisses me off because when I talk about this movie to people that have either A, never seen it, or B, you know, only seen it once and really didn't give it the attention, like, it's just like the name, because it came out in 2004, the same year the Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yep.
So people were comparing this to like scary movie, superhero movie, date movie, just a spoof movie to make fun of zombies. And I'm like, damn it, that is so far from the truth.
Yeah.
Like, and like I said, the comedy really lands. Like, there's a moment where Shaun and his group of friends are walking through an alley, and they meet up with one of Shaun's other friends, and she's with her group, and they're all walking by
Mirrors of each other.
They're like the doppelgangers of each other.
So funny.
So funny. And like, that to me is like the comedy that lands. It's not like way over the top. There's another moment that I'd like to talk about in this movie. I don't know what the game's called, but there's this game where like you have a really long pole that's in the ground. It's got like a ball on it, like a tennis ball. And you keep hitting it's like tetherball. I think it's tetherball.
Yeah.
And there's a zombie there, and Shaun has the tetherball pole, and he looks over at the girls, and they're like, and he spins it, and he hits the zombie in the head with the tennis ball, and the zombie keeps walking. He's like, no, it's rubbish. And they're like, like telling him to stab him. And that part makes me laugh every time, just the way he looks at the girls, looks over at the zombie, spins it, and lets the tennis ball hit him in the head. And he's like, no, that's rubbish. And then he looks back at them for them to like, come on. Like that part. It's such a little moment. But even the first time I'd see this, like, we were in the cinema watching it, and I just busted up laughing at that part. Like, I was like holding my sides laughing at that part. And Ashley was like, Ken, it was not that funny. I was like, you're not that funny. That's hilarious. Like, I don't know, like those little moments like that, like, I feel like that could have even been like an ad lib moment. you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like Peg is definitely smart enough to come up with a moment like that
Yes.
on set, you
Yes.
know. And I'm not taking anything away from anybody else, any other of the
Sure.
writers or anything, but
Yeah.
Peg is just one of those comedic geniuses that really does a lot of ad-libbing on set. And, you know, they'll go back and they'll talk to each other. You know, him and Wright would talk to each other about, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Like, there was a lot of rewrites while they were going that wasn't really detrimental to other people, just little things to make it funnier or more impactful. And I think that's why people want to work with Edgar Wright so badly, because he's one of those directors that is all about his actors and making his actors happy and experimentation. And you could see a lot of that in Shaun. And that movie, like I said, it's a movie that I could literally put on at any time and just be so enamored with it. And I'll always find different parts to make me laugh and cry and feel fear. There's a couple different really emotional gut punches in this film. Like,
there are. Yeah.
The part where his stepdad's dying in the backseat and he's like, it was so hard for me to be your dad. You were 12 when I met you. You already had a dad. You know, and it's just like that moment where it's like, you know, he wasn't a dick.
And Shaun realizes it. Yeah.
That he did love him. You know, and he's like, that. And when he's like, that's not my dad anymore. And she's like, really, Shaun, right now? And he's like, no, it was. But the guy in there now is not. Like, he finally admits that was his dad. Like, in that moment was super impactful. Or when they're going over the plan. All right, we'll go to Mom's, kill Philip. Like, and every time, like, they're doing this, they're saying pretty much the same thing, but you can tell they film different takes.
Yeah, the sections of this. Yeah.
Right, and that's, sorry, Phil. You know, like, and every time they're doing it, like, you can tell they filmed it differently. Even if it's just like a tiny bit different.
Yeah.
And that to me is dedication. Because they could have just did it, you know, okay, we'll do it.
And just
and
reuse
each time we're going to show. Right.
Yeah.
But they did it differently every single time with different voice inflictions. And then obviously huge homages to films that came before him. Naming Shaun's mom Barbara. And when she doesn't want to leave the house and Ed gets on the phone, we're coming to get you, Barbara.
Like, no, like, dead. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a difference between spoofing a movie and paying homage to a movie. That was not a Night of the Living Dead spoof. That was a total like love letter to a movie that helped influence this movie. And I'm not against spoof movies. I think Scary Movie 1 through 3 is a perfect trilogy of spoof films. I think they are so funny, but that's what they set out to do. And with Shaun, they didn't. They set out to make a real film with heart, and they did. It's my favorite horror comedy. I consider House a horror movie. I know I'm lame, but if we're talking about just like straight horror comedies, Shaun's going to be number one for me.
Yeah.
It's one of the most perfect films. If it had a different title, I think it might even be my favorite film of all time. But the title pisses me off so much, just because I feel like it ruined people's perspective on what the film was.
Yeah, and I will tell you that is true, because I actually put off watching this for a long time because I do not like spoof movies. And actually horror comedies, even when they're not spoof movies, are really hard sells for me very often. Like, I tend to want the heavier stuff. And so when I heard about this movie, I was like, ugh, like all I thought of was those over the top, ridiculous, making fun of kind of things. And it's when it's a genre that you love, you don't really want to watch it be made fun of. And I love zombie films. I thought, no, and I put it off for the longest time. And then, you know, the first time I watched it, it wasn't one of those things that I had to rewatch. I watched it the one time and I was like, this is not at all what I expected. And then it became an instant favorite for me. I really love it. And you know, it's interesting because it does pay homage a lot to like Night of the Living Dead, especially with that one line. But what was funny to me is, like, I have my friend Tasha who's worked with me really closely on the channel before. She is a huge fan. This is like one of her favorite movies. She absolutely will rate this over anything. She loves this movie. She had never seen, she didn't know what that line was from. And she didn't watch Night of the Living Dead for the first time until like maybe last year, but it was because of this movie, because it intrigued her enough to say, oh, I haven't seen this classic movie. I haven't seen where this came from. And I think that is an even bigger testament to the way that the story unfolds and the way that it's told, because it's going to make people who haven't seen those things curious and want to go back and watch the older ones and see where some of that stuff came from.
And I agree. And what this movie does well is it influences you to watch other films, but it also influences you to speak on the, you know, you got red on you.
Yeah.
How's that for a slice of fried gold? Yeah, boy. You know, like, there's just so many moments throughout this film that just are laugh out loud funny to me.
So true. Yeah, I totally agree.
It's one of those. I put this like one that I put a little bit below it, but it's still right. Like Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah.
Is another one that I rate right up there with Shaun, because it's a horror comedy that
Mm-hmm.
knows what it wants to be, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it takes itself seriously enough not to be a spoof film.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
again, I'm not saying anything bad about spoof films, because I do think that that's an art that is very hard to perfect.
Yeah.
The first
They
three
have a
scary
place.
movies
People like those.
perfected that art. Airplane perfected that art. And then you get like, in my opinion, the later on, like the epic movie, date movie, that we're just kind of like, this is kind of just corny and, you know, not very well done. So it does take, you know, a very, very great writer, a very, very great. Well, obviously, I'm not one of those. It does take a well-educated writer to be able to perfect a spoof movie like this, like Zucker's did. You know, like I think that that's something that is just like so hard to perfect. So yeah, like I said, the first three scary movies were really well done in that aspect. But then you get movies like Shaun and Tucker and Dale that don't want to be a spoof movie, but they, like I said, they'll take themselves serious enough to have their own original story that's a continuous, you know, the continuity is there. But they're don't take themselves seriously enough to know that they can laugh at themselves. So that's why those two movies both especially are very, very special to me, because they perfected the middle ground of being funny and horror at the same time.
Yeah, which again is not an easy thing to do. So yeah. Well, your last one's not a super funny one.
No.
And that's is Stephen King's Sometimes They Come Back.
Made for TV. Never got a theatrical release. This is the King novelization I would like to see remade today. I have Night Shift right here, which contains Sometimes They Come Back in it. I love the novelization of it. It's way different than even the made-for-TV movie. And I think both have their benefits, both have their weaknesses. Sometimes They Come Back is another movie that just, as a kid, I remember we watched this together as a family when it was on TV. And there's a moment in the film where Jimmy is watching, or he's Jim now, when the adult. When I talk about adult, I'll say Jim. When I talk about child, I'll say Jimmy.
Fair enough.
When Jim is watching Godzilla on TV and he's kind of drifting off to sleep, and it kind of morphs into a home video of him and his brother Wayne playing outside. And they're laughing and joking, and then Wayne's face just turns to stone and he does the "Run, Jimmy, run!" And that shit scared me so bad as a kid. It was huge. Like, that was just like a huge moment, because stuff like that's always scared me. And Stephen King made for TV adaptations, especially like in the It adaptation in 1990, when Bill's looking through Georgie's photo album and the picture winks at him, that always freaked me out. You know, that was like realistic to me.
Yep.
And the same thing with this, like watching a home video and it changes on you. So I know Sometimes They Come Back isn't a very well-known film. A little synopsis. These boys are going to return library books. Jimmy and Wayne, on their way there, they get stopped by 4 greasers inside of a train tunnel. One of them stabs Wayne on accident when they're throwing him around. Wayne dies. The greasers try to get in their car. Car won't start. The greasers die. And then 27 years later, for Stephen King fans, you know what that means. They come back one at a time to seek revenge against Jim Norman, Jimmy as an adult. And it's epic. This is an epic film. And it's funny because, like, if 8-year-old me knew that 37-year-old me would become friends with Brantley Mitchum and Chris Demetral, who played Wayne and North from this film, he would just like, if 8-year-old me knew that 37-year-old me had their phone numbers and called and talked to them and shit, he would just like freak out, you know. Like, and I told them that, you know, like, you know, this is cool, like, this is awesome, like, 2 people that like I genuinely looked up to growing up and their acting styles and what they did. And Sometimes They Come Back, I just feel could really make a really well why can I not speak tonight? It would make a fantastic theatrical film now with a good budget. Yeah. I feel like this would be an easy sell for a studio. You know, you got Stephen King, and even now, like even if it went straight to Amazon or Peacock or something like that.
Yeah.
As long as you don't go the way of Pet Sematary Bloodlines and
I haven't seen that yet.
I mean, look, Henry Thomas, his performance alone in this movie is worth watching the movie.
Okay.
It's award worthy. Henry Thomas, I think, is one of the most underrated horror actors of all time. Everything he's done in horror.
What else has he been in? Because I can't picture the face.
He played in The Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor.
Oh, okay.
Gerald's
Like
Game.
The dad in Bly Manor. I mean, in Hill House.
Hill House. Yep.
I gotcha.
He was
Okay.
He was the young boy at E.T.
Yes, gotcha.
He also played Jack Torrance in Dr. Sleep, which is epic.
Yeah.
But he's one of my favorite horror actors. And I think that he's underrated, and his performance alone in this movie is worth the price of admission. The problem is, if you're a huge fan of Pet Sematary, this movie's going to piss you off because of the amount of the story that it retcons, and it completely changes.
Okay.
Because the basic idea of Bloodlines is, you've obviously seen Pet Sematary 1989.
Yeah.
When Judd Crandall's telling the story about Timmy Bateman and how he came back from the war.
Yep.
It's that story.
Just that story, right? Yeah.
And it's way, way, way different than the way Judd told it in the future. A lot of stuff is way different, and it completely retcons a lot of things, and you're like, this makes no sense. As a movie itself, it's good. You know, the story is okay. The acting on all parts really is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're such huge fans of 89 and the way that it erases a lot of that story, it's a bummer. So as long as they did Sometimes They Come Back that did not do that, I would be okay with it. Like, that's something I would be, I would think that'd be just swell if we could do that today and not fuck it up. Like,
right.
Because this movie, like I said, like the novelization is so much different. You could even go buy the novel and make kind of like they just did with the Boogeyman.
Yeah. Okay.
They changed. I will say, and I'm not one of those people that are like, oh, I think the book is better. I'm not one of those people. I did think the short story for the Boogeyman was better than the movie just because of the ending.
I've never read it.
And I know that people talk about how Stephen King can't stick the landing with an ending. His ending to the Boogeyman short story is wow. So those both, the Boogeyman short story, which is also part of Night Shift, is the audio version is available on YouTube, and Sometimes They Come Back. The movie is free on YouTube as well. And this is the first movie that I really remember like feeling sad at a horror movie. Like House had its moments, like with, there's more happy moments, and I was too young to understand watching the kid get taken, how sad that was.
Oh, sure.
To me, that was just like scary. I couldn't relate to the parental part of it. I related to the kid part of it. So it was just scary.
Yeah.
But in this movie, like when he's watching his brother die, like I felt really sad watching that part. Like, wow, this is really, that was the first time like watching a horror movie. Like I got that lump in my throat. Like, what's happening right now? Like, I feel like I'm going to cry. And then, like I said, the fear that comes along with this movie, the Run Jimmy Run stuff froze me alone. Like that was so scary. And then when they're doing, it's corny now, but when they got the kid in the car and they're doing the face, and he's like, wow, we got to do the face. We must be bored to be doing this shit, man. Like that part scared me. When the kid gets ran off the road and you get the close up on his face, that shit scared me.
Yeah.
And like, this is another movie where my big trigger, and you know this about me, Angel, my big trigger in films is sexual assault. Like that's the thing for me that is like for some people it's kids getting hurt or animals getting hurt or something like that. For me, it's sexual assault. Like that's my big trigger. And this movie has a very, very implied sexual assault scene, but you don't see it. You don't see anything about it. They imply it quite heavily.
Right. Yeah.
But you never see anything. And it's just like, as a kid, I didn't even realize that there was sexual assault undertones in this moment. Just because, like, the way that it was done, obviously made for TV, there's
Oh, sure.
nothing sexual shown or spoken about. But when you become more mature and you understand certain things, you're like, I know what's happening here. And it's obviously like, so, but the way they did it, there's no such thing as a tasteful way to do it. This is the closest way to, like I said, you don't hear any sounds, you don't see anything visually.
Right.
It's just implied what happened.
Yeah.
An actress wasn't put in an uncomfortable situation to
Yeah.
show parts of her body that she wasn't comfortable with, or to act out these things with 3 different men. You know, like, there was nothing like, because that's what I see when I see these things. When people are like, oh, it's a movie. No actress has got to be comfortable going through that type of thing with her naked body.
I certainly wouldn't be. I couldn't even imagine.
Right. And what it's implying, and from what I've had friends and family members go through, it's just something that makes me super uncomfortable too.
Yeah.
So
I'm the same way. Yep.
Yeah, so that's for me. And the way that this movie did that, and obviously it's made for TV, so they couldn't have, even if they wanted to. But like I said, it's very much implied, but it was done so well that even, me as a little kid didn't even catch on to what they were hinting at. I was like, oh, they killed that girl. But
right.
Yeah. So like, again, I agree. This is there's no laughing moments, and sometimes they come back for me. Like, this whole movie, top to bottom, is just terrifying.
Yeah, way more serious. Yeah. And you're talking about the clips of, like, anytime there's something that's like a comfort thing. So it's like same thing with, like, in it, when it's like, the picture changing, or it's anything that you would associate as a comfort thing with your family, and then being pulled out of it into this uncomfortable, like, not normal thing. Yeah, it's just it's smart. That's just really smart filmmaking. Yeah, definitely.
And it's funny that the two most impactful versions of that came from Stephen King made for TV films. The Georgie Wink.
I hadn't even thought. Yeah,
the right. Georgie Wink and the Run Jimmy Run. Like, those two are just so impactful, because the way that Chris Demetrol's playing in that moment, the way he's playing and he's laughing with his brother and he's got his arm around him, and then his face just changes. Run, Jimmy, run! Like, man, it's so good. So good.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of that's similar, but I still don't think lands the same, is that's probably why some of the clips from Sinister were so uncomfortable, because they're home movies. And it goes from moments where you're like, you see this family and they're doing this very family thing, and then it goes like, really, really dark, really, really fast. But it's the same thing. It's like this comfortable, like, oh, we have videos. Like, my parents still have tapes of me from when I was a baby, when we did, the big camcorder things. And so when you see those things, you're like, oh yeah, like nostalgia. And then it like cuts and it's like something totally different. And you're not prepared for it. It's effective, man. I tell you, I agree.
Right. And I think the big thing about that too is, like, especially in Sinister, they shot that on 8mm film. Like, it wasn't like added in post. So that's genuine. Like, and the score there, like,
yeah.
Oh, it's just so unsettling. I completely agree.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's your list. House, Child's Play 3, Evil Dead 2, Shaun of the Dead, and sometimes they come back. Yeah. I always love when people come on and they have like ones that have not been on here before. Although it's true is when people do have the same ones, 9 out of 10 times, they're not going to say the same things. It always ends up being, it's a completely, I've had 5 people do Halloween. Every single person has been something totally different every single time. And it's kind of, that's like one of the things I love about the genre, is the way it impacts and hits people in so many different ways. It's like a different conversation every time.
Yeah. And then that's what I love about, like, because I feel that same way with my first horror movie. It doesn't matter how many times I talk about Poltergeist or Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street. It's somebody's personal experience. Yeah. So when you have your personal experience with it, it's going to be a completely different story, even though you're talking about the same movie every time.
Yeah. No, totally agree. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Well, thanks again for making time to do this. This was a lot of fun.
I've been looking forward to it for a very long time.
Me too. I love talking to you guys anyway. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's always a good time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's why we love to have you back on the channel so often, because we have a genuine great time anytime you're there.
No, yeah. Well, once again, Sledgehammer's links is going to be in the description for this episode. And I think that's going to wrap up this episode of Influential Horror. So make sure you're following them. Go sub to their YouTube channel. It's such a wide variety. There's something for everybody, promise. Guarantee you'll have a good time if you go over there. Yeah, that's all I have for this one. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend coming up, and we will see you in the next one.